Hey everyone, we're drifting back to a story of walls, stones, and very tired people. When people think of the Great Wall of China, the mental picture is usually pretty flattering. Endless miles of stone snaking across green hills, photographed in just the right morning mist. An engineering marvel, a testament to human determination, and maybe even, if you're the type who likes metaphors, some kind of big cultural statement about strength and resilience. But of course the reality was messier. The Great Wall wasn't so much one wall as a series of walls, often patched together, extended, abandoned, rebuilt, or simply forgotten until someone needed it again. And while emperors like to imagine themselves as the masterminds behind this eternal monument, the truth is that it was built on the backs of people who were generally nameless, overworked, and almost certainly not very enthusiastic about stacking rocks in the middle of nowhere. So tonight, we're not really focusing on emperors in silk robes, though naturally they'll wander in at the edges, issuing orders and taking credit. Instead, we're focusing on the laborers, the forgotten builders, the soldiers, peasants, convicts, and prisoners of war who did the real work, and who, for some reason, didn't even get their names carved on a nice plaque. Let's begin with the Qin dynasty. You know, the one where Emperor Qin Shi Huang decided to unify China by force, invent some standardized weights and measures and, oh yes, bury himself in an underground city of terracotta statues. Because of course he did. This was around the 3rd century BCE, when China was a collection of warring states, and Qin finally won. Naturally, once he had declared himself the first emperor of China, he had to think about walls. Because nothing says unified empire like deciding you need a really long barrier against northern nomadic tribes. The construction process was brutal. There weren't enthusiastic construction workers with shiny helmets. There were peasants conscripted from their villages, soldiers ordered off the battlefield, and convicts sentenced to hard labor, which in practice meant, congratulations, you're about to spend the rest of your short life carrying rocks up hills. And here's the thing about this early wall. It wasn't the neat, grey-bricked postcard version. It was rammed earth, layer upon layer of soil packed down until it was basically solid. The kind of wall that looked impressive from a distance, but up close probably resembled the world's least appealing layer cake. Thousands died during construction. Some collapsed from exhaustion, others from hunger or exposure. If you were unlucky enough to be sent to the wall, it was essentially a slow-motion death sentence. There's even a legend that bodies of the dead were used as filler inside the wall itself. Historians mostly agree that's exaggerated. It wouldn't have been structurally sound, for one thing, but the legend survived for centuries because it felt true to the misery of the experience. Now let's drift gently forward a few centuries, because the wall, like so many royal projects, was not a one-and-done affair. After the Qin dynasty collapsed, other dynasties patched and rebuilt parts of it. Sometimes it was taken seriously, other times it was neglected. Imagine inheriting a giant, crumbling wall system and thinking, yes, let's add another 100 miles. By the Ming dynasty, which lasted from the 14th to the 17th century, we finally get the version of the wall most people picture today. Bricks, battlements, watchtowers. The whole dramatic postcard package. And once again, it wasn't emperors laying the bricks. It was an endless stream of soldiers, peasants, and convicts. The laborers slept in temporary camps, often without enough food. Disease spread quickly. Winter was brutal. Summer was worse. And the work never really ended because walls are needy things. They crumble, they erode. They collapse if you ignore them. If you were a soldier assigned to wall duty, it wasn't exactly glorious. You weren't charging into battle or being remembered for military valor. You were lifting bricks, stacking them carefully, and praying no one noticed if you stopped to catch your breath. There's a Ming record that suggests over 1 million people were involved in constructing and maintaining the wall at various points, which sounds impressive, until you realize that most of them weren't there by choice. Now about those convicts. Being sentenced to the wall was a common punishment, and not in the fun, build character kind of way. Imagine committing some small crime, maybe stealing a chicken because you were starving, and ending up with a lifetime assignment of wall building. It's almost poetic in the worst way possible. And naturally, the emperors like to frame it as an honor, as if laboring on the wall was some great patriotic duty, when really it was just forced labor with a scenic view. If you survived long enough, you might get to see the finished section of wall and feel a flicker of pride, but more often you just didn't survive. Now the strange part is how invisible these people became in the official story. The emperors were praised, the generals got credit, but the actual hands that stacked the stones were forgotten. Even when poets and scholars wrote about the wall, they usually described it in grand terms as a symbol of imperial strength, not as the miserable, back-breaking ordeal it really was. But there are a few scattered records and folk songs that hint at the suffering. Songs about men taken from their families, women left behind, children growing up without fathers, stories about mothers searching the wall for sons who never returned. In one legend, a woman named Meng Jiangnu cried so much at the loss of her husband that part of the wall collapsed, which is, of course, a poetic way of saying, yes, everyone knew this was an absolute human disaster. Let's drift over to another detail. The wall wasn't even particularly effective. For all that suffering, nomadic raiders still got through. Sometimes they went around it, sometimes they bribed guards, sometimes they just found a weak point and broke through. And yet, emperors kept rebuilding it, convinced that this time it would definitely work. It's one of history's great ironies. Millions of lives spent, endless suffering, all for a wall that wasn't as impenetrable as advertised. A bit like locking your door, but leaving the window open. And so the wall stands today as one of the world's great monuments. Tourists walk along the stones, take photos, and marvel at the scale of it. But most never stop to think about the people who actually built it. The forgotten soldiers, peasants, and convicts whose names were never written down. If anything, the silence is the monument. The wall stretches on, but the voices of those who built it are gone, as if swallowed up by the stones themselves. And that perhaps is the most honest thing about it.